Lyra didn't know that the bleeding stranger at the temple gates was the most powerful man in the realm. She didn't know that he had searched every sacred site, every temple, every shrine for her, and she certainly didn't know that when she defied every sacred vow to heal him, she would discover the golden thread of destiny that would shatter everything she believed about her calling. The sacred flame flickered in the evening breeze, casting dancing shadows across the marble walls of the Temple of the Moon Goddess. Lyra knelt before the altar, her white robes pooled around her like moonlight on water, her hands steady as she tended the eternal fire that had burned for 1,000 years. The scent of jasmine and myrrh filled the air, mingling with the soft whispers of evening prayers from her sister priestesses. At 23, she had spent 15 years within these hallowed walls, 15 years learning the sacred texts, 15 years preparing her heart and soul for the day her fated mate would come to claim her. Until that blessed day, she belonged wholly to the goddess, bound by vows of celibacy and service that were as unbreakable as the marble beneath her knees. "The lunar festival begins at moonrise," Sister Mira whispered, settling beside her with a soft rustle of fabric. "The whole city will celebrate. Are you certain you won't join the procession?" Lyra's fingers traced the silver pendant at her throat, the crescent moon that marked her as one of the chosen. "My place is here. The sacred flame requires constant tending." But even as she spoke the words, something restless stirred in her chest. 16 festivals she had watched from these windows, 16 times she had felt the pull of the world beyond these walls. Tonight felt different. Tonight the very air seemed charged with possibility. The temple bells began their evening song when the commotion started. Shouts echoed from the outer courtyard, the clash of steel, the thunder of approaching hooves. Lyra's head snapped up, her heart suddenly racing. The temple was sanctuary. No violence was permitted within its walls. "What's happening?" Mira gasped, pressing close to the window. Through the lattice stone, Lyra saw him. A man stumbled through the temple gates, one hand pressed to his side where blood seeped between his fingers. His dark hair was matted with sweat and dirt, his clothes torn and travel-stained, but there was something about the way he moved, controlled even in desperation, dangerous even in defeat. Behind him the sound of pursuit grew louder. "Close the gates," the high priestess commanded, her voice sharp with authority. "The temple will not harbour fugitives." But Lyra was already moving. Something in her chest pulled tight, a golden thread tugging her forward with an urgency she had never felt before. Her feet carried her down the marble steps before her mind could form the command, her robes billowing behind her like wings. "Stop!" The word left her lips with more force than she had ever used in these sacred halls. The high priestess turned, her eyes wide with shock. "Sister Lyra, return to your prayers at once." But Lyra couldn't stop, wouldn't stop. The stranger had fallen to one knee just inside the courtyard, his breath coming in harsh pants. His eyes, goddess help her, his eyes scanning the space until they found hers. Grey, storm-coloured and fierce, with a depth that seemed to see straight through to her soul. The moment their gazes met, the world tilted on its axis. Heat. It started in her fingertips and raced up her arms, spreading through her chest like liquid fire. Something in her very bones recognized him, called to him, pulled toward him with a force that made her gasp aloud. This was what she had been taught to recognize. This was the sign the goddess would send when her chosen mate arrived. Impossible. She was imagining things. The excitement of the festival, the drama of his arrival. It was making her foolish. Fated bonds were rare, sacred things. They didn't happen to temple girls during random rescue attempts. But as she knelt beside him, as her hands hovered over his wound, the heat intensified. Golden warmth pulsed between them, visible even in the dying light. He caught her wrist, his fingers wrapping around her delicate bones with surprising gentleness, for hands so clearly made for violence. "You feel it too," he whispered, his voice rough with pain and something deeper. You feel it too. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The sacred texts spoke of this, the recognition, the pull, the golden fire that burned between destined souls. But this couldn't be real. This stranger, this dangerous man who brought violence to their peaceful sanctuary, couldn't be the mate the goddess had chosen for her. I don't know what you mean, she lied, even as her hands trembled against his skin. He smiled then, an expression both tender and knowing that transformed his harsh features into something beautiful. Your hands are shaking. They were. Despite 15 years of training in serenity and composure, she was shaking like a leaf in a storm. The warmth where their skin touched was spreading through her entire body, settling somewhere behind her sternum like a second heartbeat. Please, she whispered, though she wasn't sure what she was pleading for. I have to help you. You're bleeding. And you're bound by vows. His thumb traced across her pulse point, and she nearly gasped at the sensation. I can see it in your eyes. You belong to your goddess. I do. The words came out stronger than she felt. I belong wholly to the moon goddess until my fated mate claims me. And if he already has? The question hung between them like a challenge. Lyra stared into those storm-grey eyes and felt her world shifting, changing, becoming something entirely new. This was impossible. This was terrifying. This was everything she had prayed for and everything she feared. You don't understand, she said, her voice barely a whisper. My vows are sacred. I cannot. I know what you felt, he interrupted, his grip on her wrist tightening just enough to anchor her to this moment. I felt it the second I saw you. Golden fire racing through your veins like lightning, the recognition that goes deeper than thought, deeper than choice. She couldn't deny it, couldn't pretend that her entire body hadn't come alive the moment their eyes met. But she could resist it. I have duties, she said, trying to pull away, sacred obligations that cannot be broken for a stranger whose name I don't even know. He held her gaze for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in those grey depths. My name is Kieran. Just Kieran. No family name, no title, no indication of who he was or where he came from. But the way he said it, with such quiet authority, made something inside her chest flutter. I need to tend your wound, she said, forcing practicality into her voice. Then you need to leave. This is a sacred place. I know. His voice was soft now, almost reverent. I've been searching for sacred places, looking for something, someone. The implication made her pulse race, but she forced herself to focus on the task at hand. His wound was deep but clean, requiring careful stitching and blessing herbs. As she worked, she tried to ignore the way he watched her, tried to pretend that every accidental brush of skin didn't send fire racing through her nervous system. There, she said finally, securing the last bandage. You'll heal cleanly, but you need rest. And you need answers. She did, but she was afraid of them, afraid of what they might mean for the life she had built within these walls, the destiny she had spent 15 years preparing for. The High Priestess will want you gone by morning, she said instead. I can prepare a room in the healing wing for tonight, but... Lyra. The way he said her name made her freeze, like a prayer, like a promise, like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. I know this frightens you, I know it changes everything, but we need to talk about what this means. She looked at him then, really looked at him. Beneath the dirt and exhaustion, she could see the fine quality of his clothes, the sword at his hip that bore no common maker's mark, the way he held himself like a man accustomed to being obeyed. Whatever else he wasn't just some wandering sellsword who had stumbled into sanctuary. Tomorrow, she whispered, we can talk tomorrow. But even as she said it, she knew tomorrow would bring questions she wasn't ready to answer, choices she wasn't prepared to make. The golden warmth still pulsed between them, a constant reminder that her carefully ordered world had just been turned completely upside down. As she led him toward the healing chambers, she felt his eyes on her back like a physical touch. And when she finally closed the door between them, when she pressed her back against the cool stone and tried to steady her racing heart, one thought echoed through her mind with devastating clarity. Everything had just changed, and there was no going back. The days that followed were a strange rhythm of stolen moments and careful pretense. 3 days of bringing him meals on simple wooden trays, 3 days of changing his bandages while pretending her hands didn't tremble every time their skin touched, 3 days of conversations that grew deeper with each passing hour until Lyra found herself looking forward to his company with an intensity that terrified her. "You don't have to do this yourself," Sister Mira whispered as Lyra prepared another tray. "The healing servants could tend to him." But the thought of anyone else touching him, anyone else sitting beside his bed in the quiet hours before dawn, made something possessive and entirely unwelcome rise in her chest. "He's my responsibility. I brought him into sanctuary." Mira's knowing look made heat climb Lyra's neck. "Is that all he is?" Lyra's hand stilled on the bread she was cutting. "Of course. What else would he be?" But even as she spoke the words, she knew they were a lie. Kieran wasn't just a patient, wasn't just a stranger seeking sanctuary. He was something far more dangerous. He was the man who made her question everything she had ever believed about her calling. The healing chamber was filled with morning sunlight when she entered, and he was sitting up in bed, his back against the carved headboard, looking stronger than he had since his arrival. The sight of him, dark hair falling across his forehead, those storm-grey eyes alert and focused entirely on her, made her breath catch. "You're healing well," she said, setting the tray on the small table beside his bed. "The wound is closing cleanly." "Thanks to your skilled hands." His voice was rough from sleep, intimate in a way that made her pulse quicken. "I've been thinking about what you said, about sacred obligations." Lyra busied herself arranging the items on his tray: honeyed bread, fresh milk, early strawberries from the temple gardens, anything to avoid looking directly at him. "There's nothing to think about. My path was chosen long before you arrived." "By you? Or for you?" The question was quietly spoken, but it hit her like a physical blow. She had never questioned her calling, never wondered if the choice to dedicate her life to the goddess had truly been her own. She had been 8 years old when she arrived at the temple, 8 years old and orphaned with nowhere else to go. "I was called," she said firmly. "The goddess chose me. And now she sent me to you." "You don't know that," but her voice wavered, betraying her doubt. "You could be anyone, a criminal, a soldier, a man who has spent months searching every temple in the realm, following dreams that led me straight to you." He leaned forward, and she could feel the weight of his attention, like sunshine on her skin. "A man who has never felt what I felt the moment I saw you standing in that courtyard." The golden warmth was there again, pulsing between them like a living thing. Lyra pressed her hands to her lap to keep them from reaching for him, but she couldn't stop herself from finally meeting his eyes. "Tell me about the dreams," she whispered. Something vulnerable flickered across his features. Fire and gold twisting through darkness, a voice calling my name, and always, at the centre of it all, a woman in white robes with eyes like starlight. His hand moved across the coverlet, fingers reaching toward hers. "Eyes exactly like yours." Her breath caught. The goddess speaks to her chosen through dreams. Then perhaps we're both chosen. The possibility hung between them, tempting and terrifying. Lyra had spent her entire adult life preparing for her fated mate, but she had imagined someone gentle and scholarly, someone who would understand the quiet rhythms of temple life. Not this dangerous stranger who made her feel wild and reckless and alive in ways she had never experienced. "You're afraid," he said, and it wasn't a question. "Yes." The admission came out barely above a whisper. "I'm afraid of what this means. I'm afraid of wanting something I can't have." "What makes you think you can't have it?" She gestured helplessly around the chamber, at the carved symbols of the goddess that adorned every surface. "This is my world. These walls, these vows, this service, it's all I've ever known. I don't know how to be anything else." "I'm not asking you to be anything else." He moved then, shifting closer to the edge of the bed until his knees nearly touched the chair where she sat. "I'm asking you to be exactly who you are, but with me." The longing in his voice nearly undid her. "You don't understand what that would mean. The scandal, the questions." "I lost my family when I was 16, he said suddenly, the words cutting through her protests like a blade. "Raiders attacked our lands in the dead of night. I watched them burn everything I had ever loved." The pain in his voice made her heart clench. Without thinking, she reached for his hand, covering his scarred knuckles with her palm. The touch sent fire racing up her arm, but she didn't pull away. "I'm sorry," she breathed. "That's terrible." "I've been searching for home ever since." His fingers turned beneath hers, threading their hands together with a tenderness that made her eyes sting. "For belonging, for the feeling that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." He looked at her then, and the naked honesty in his expression stole her breath. "I felt it the moment I saw you, home." Lyra stared at their joined hands, at the way her pale fingers looked against his darker skin, at the golden shimmer that seemed to dance between their palms. This was what the sacred text described, the perfect recognition, the sense of completion that came only with one's destined mate. But knowing it and accepting it were two very different things. "I don't know how," she whispered. "I don't know how to want someone this much and still be the woman I was raised to be." "You don't have to choose yet." His thumb traced across her knuckles, a gentle caress that made her shiver. "We can take this slowly, one conversation at a time, one touch at a time." The promise in his voice made heat pool low in her belly, unfamiliar and overwhelming. She had never wanted to be touched before, never craved contact beyond the formal rituals of her calling. But with Kieran she wanted things that had no place in a temple, things that made her feel guilty and exhilarated in equal measure. "The High Priestess is already suspicious," she said, forcing herself to focus on practical matters. "She questions why I spend so much time here." "And what do you tell her?" "That healing requires patience and care." She met his eyes. "But she's not fooled. None of them are." A shadow crossed his features. "I don't want to bring trouble to your temple." "You already have." The words came out more honest than she intended, but not the kind you're thinking of. Before he could ask what she meant, the sound of footsteps in the corridor made her pull her hand away from his. Sister Mira appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "The High Priestess requests your presence," she said to Lyra. "Immediately." Lyra's stomach dropped. She stood on unsteady legs, smoothing her robes with hands that trembled slightly. "I'll return later to check your bandages," she told Kieran, but she couldn't quite meet his eyes. "Lyra." Her name on his lips stopped her at the door. When she turned, he was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Whatever she says, whatever threats she makes, remember what you felt when you first touched me. That's real. That's worth fighting for." The words followed her down the marble corridors, echoing in her mind as she made her way to the High Priestess's chamber. Worth fighting for. But was she brave enough to fight for it? Was she strong enough to risk everything she had ever known for a love that felt too powerful, too overwhelming, too perfect to possibly last? The High Priestess was waiting for her in the centre of the circular chamber, her silver hair gleaming in the afternoon light, her pale blue eyes sharp with disapproval. "Sister Lyra, sit." Lyra knelt on the cushion across from the older woman, folding her hands in her lap and trying to project the serene composure she had been taught since childhood. But inside, her heart was racing, the golden warmth still pulsing through her veins like an echo of Kieran's touch. "You have been spending considerable time with our guest." It wasn't a question, but Lyra answered anyway. He required extensive healing, The wound was deep. The wound is healed, yet you continue to visit his chamber multiple times each day. Heat climbed Lyra's neck. I wanted to ensure there would be no complications. Do you take me for a fool? The high priestess's voice cut through her explanation like ice. I have eyes, child. I have seen the way you look at him, the way he looks at you. The words hung between them, an accusation and a warning. Lyra lifted her chin, drawing on 15 years of training in dignity and composure. He is a guest under our protection. I have shown him only the courtesy our goddess demands. Our goddess demands purity, dedication, sacred vows that cannot be broken for the first handsome stranger who stumbles through our gates. The older woman leaned forward, her gaze piercing. You are one of our most promising priestesses, Lyra. Do not throw away your calling for a man you barely know. But that was the problem, wasn't it? She did know him. The golden fire that burned between them told her everything she needed to know about who he was, what he meant to her, what they could be together. The goddess herself had marked him as hers. What if he's not just any man, she asked quietly. What if he's the one the goddess chose for me? The high priestess's expression hardened. Then you will know for certain when the proper time comes. Until then, you will remember your vows and conduct yourself accordingly. She paused, studying Lyra's face with uncomfortable intensity. Perhaps it would be best if you focused your energies elsewhere for a time. I'm considering sending you to the mountain temple. The solitude would be good for your spiritual development. The threat was clear. Continue down this path, and she would be sent away from everything she had ever known, away from Kieran. I understand, Lyra said, though her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. Good. The stranger leaves tomorrow. Once he's gone, we can put this unfortunate distraction behind us. Tomorrow. The word echoed through Lyra's mind as she made her way back through the temple corridors. One more day, and then Kieran would disappear from her life as suddenly as he had entered it. The thought made something desperate claw at her chest, a panic unlike anything she had ever experienced. But what choice did she have? Her vows were sacred, binding, eternal. She belonged to the goddess until her true mate claimed her. And even if she believed, even if she knew that Kieran was that mate, the high priestess would never accept it. The temple would never sanction a union based on 3 days of stolen conversations and touches that set her soul on fire. She paused outside the healing chamber, pressing her palm against the cool wood of the door. On the other side, she could hear him moving around, probably restless after days of forced convalescence. In a few hours, she would bring him his evening meal. They would talk, and she would memorize every word, every expression, every moment of warmth between them. And then she would have to let him go. The golden thread that connected them pulsed with every heartbeat, a constant reminder of what she was about to lose. But perhaps that was for the best. Perhaps the goddess was testing her faith, her dedication, her willingness to sacrifice even her heart's desire for the greater good. Perhaps loving him meant letting him go. But as she stood there in the corridor, listening to his movements through the door, one truth rang clearer than all her doubts and fears. She didn't want to be noble. She didn't want to be wise. She wanted to be his. Completely and irrevocably, consequences be damned. The realization terrified her more than anything else ever had. She should have known something was different the moment she entered the healing chamber at dawn. Kieran wasn't lying weak and wounded in the narrow bed. He was standing by the arched window, his back straight and shoulders broad, looking out over the temple gardens with the bearing of a man accustomed to surveying lands that belonged to him. The morning light caught the fine embroidery on his now clean shirt, the subtle richness of fabric that spoke of wealth and position far beyond what she had imagined. "You're feeling better," she said, setting his breakfast tray on the table with hands that weren't quite steady. When he turned to face her, the transformation stole her breath. Gone was the desperate, wounded stranger who had stumbled through their gates. In his place stood a man who radiated quiet authority, whose storm-grey eyes held depths of power and responsibility she had never noticed before. He was still beautiful, still dangerous in that way that made her pulse race, but now there was something else, something that made the air itself seem to thicken with unspoken significance. "Much better," he said, and his voice carried a weight it hadn't possessed 3 days ago. "Thanks to you." She moved to check his bandages, but he caught her wrist gently, the same way he had that first night. The golden fire leapt between them, stronger now, impossible to ignore or explain away. "Lyra, there's something I need to tell you." Before he could continue, the sound of voices in the outer corridor made them both freeze. Not the soft whispers of her sister priestesses, but the sharp cadence of authority, the jingle of mail and weapons. Temple guards. "His Majesty was seen entering the temple grounds 3 nights past," a deep voice was saying. "We've come to escort him home." Lyra's world tilted. Her legs went weak, and if not for Kieran's steadying hand, she would have sunk to her knees right there on the marble floor. His Majesty. "No," she whispered, the word torn from her lips like a prayer. "No, that's not. You can't be—" "Lyra." His voice was gentle, patient, everything it had been for the past 3 days. But now she could hear it, the quiet command that expected to be obeyed, the tone of a man who ruled a kingdom. "Let me explain." The chamber door opened without ceremony, and suddenly the small healing room was filled with armed guards in the deep blue and silver of the royal house. At their head stood a man she recognized from ceremonial processions, Captain Marcus of the King's Guard, his weathered face tight with worry. "Your Majesty," he said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. "We've been searching for you. When you disappeared from the hunting party—" "I'm fine, Marcus." Kieran's attention never left Lyra's face, even as he addressed his captain. "I found what I was looking for." Found what he was looking for. The words echoed through Lyra's mind as she stared at the man she had been caring for, the man she had been falling in love with, the man who was apparently the Alpha King of the entire realm. Kieran wasn't just some wounded stranger. He was Kieran Ashford, the Wolf King, the most powerful shifter in the known world, and she was nobody. A temple girl with no family name, no inheritance, no claim to anything beyond the simple white robe she wore. "You're the king," she said, and her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. "I am." No denial, no attempt to soften the blow, just simple, devastating honesty. "You lied to me." "I never lied." He stepped closer, and she could see the pain in his storm-grey eyes. "I told you my name. I told you I was searching for someone. I just didn't tell you everything." "Everything?" The word came out sharp with hurt and disbelief. "You didn't tell me anything that mattered. You let me think you were— I don't know what I thought you were, but not this. Never this." Captain Marcus cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Your Majesty, if we could return to the palace—" "Give us a moment," Kieran commanded, his voice taking on the edge of royal authority. "All of you, wait outside." The guards filed out, leaving them alone in the suddenly cavernous chamber. Lyra wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold together the pieces of her world that were crumbling with each passing second. "You're the king," she said again, as if saying it enough times would make it make sense. "You could have any woman in the realm, princesses, duchesses, ladies of the highest birth. What could you possibly want with a temple priestess?" "You." The word was fierce, absolute. "I want you." "I'm nobody." The protest tore from her throat like a sob. "I have nothing to offer a king. No lands, no political advantage, no—" "You have everything." He moved toward her, and she backed away until her spine hit the stone wall. But he didn't stop, didn't give her space to retreat further. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite the intensity burning in his eyes. "You have everything I've been searching for." The golden warmth was there again, pulsing between them like a living thing. But now it felt different, overwhelming, impossible, too much for someone like her to contain. "I don't understand." Her voice broke on the words. "Why me? Why would the goddess choose a nobody like me for the most important man in the realm?" "Because you're not nobody." His thumbs traced across her cheekbones, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "You're everything the ancient prophecies spoke of. A woman who serves the moon goddess with pure heart and steady hands. A woman whose soul calls to mine across any distance. Prophecies, ancient texts, the weight of destiny and divine will. It was too much, too overwhelming, too impossible to believe. "I can't." The words came out as barely a whisper. "I can't be what you need. I don't know how to be a queen." "I don't need a queen." His voice was rough with emotion. "I need my mate. I need the woman who saved my life without hesitation, who cared for me when she thought I was nothing more than a wounded stranger. I need you, exactly as you are." "The realm needs a proper queen, someone with breeding, education, political connections. The realm needs stability, peace, a king who isn't slowly going mad searching for the other half of his soul." His forehead touched hers, and she could feel his breath against her lips. "I've been ruling alone for 8 years, Lyra. 8 years of council meetings and political marriages proposed and rejected. 8 years of pretending I could be complete without you." The pain in his voice made her chest ache. "You don't understand. I'm bound by sacred vows. I can't just leave with you, even if I wanted to." "Can't you?" His hand slipped to her shoulders, holding her gently but firmly. "The vows bind you until your fated mate claims you. What if I'm claiming you now?" The possibility hung between them, terrifying and exhilarating. Could it be that simple? Could the golden fire that burned between them, the recognition that had shattered her composure from the first moment, truly be enough to break bonds that had held her entire life? "The High Priestess will never accept it," she whispered. "The temple, the other priestesses. They'll say I've abandoned my calling for lust and ambition." "Then let them say it." His voice hardened with royal command. "I am the king. My word is law in this realm. If I declare you my chosen mate, no one will dare question it." The casual way he spoke of overturning her entire world made her head spin. This was what power looked like. The ability to reshape reality with nothing more than royal decree. But it also felt wrong somehow, as if their bond should be built on something more sacred than political authority. "I need time," she said desperately. "I need to think, to pray, to understand what this all means." "Time we don't have." His expression grew grim. "There are threats gathering against the realm. Enemies who grow bolder with each day. I remain unmated, without an heir to secure the succession. I've already been away too long." The weight of responsibility in his voice made her realize how selfish she was being. While she struggled with her own fears and doubts, he carried the safety of an entire kingdom on his shoulders. "What are you asking of me?" she whispered. "Come with me." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of every dream she had ever denied herself. Leave this temple, these vows that were made for a child who didn't understand what she was choosing. Come to the capital as my mate, my queen, my partner in all things. And if the bond between us isn't real? The question slipped out before she could stop it. If this is just attraction, just the excitement of something forbidden? He smiled then, and it transformed his entire face. "You don't really believe that." She didn't. The golden thread that connected them was too strong, too perfect, too obviously divine in origin to be anything as simple as physical desire. But admitting that meant accepting a truth that would change everything. "I'm scared," she admitted, the words barely audible. "I know." His hands slipped down to capture hers, threading their fingers together. "I'm scared too, terrified that you'll say no, that I'll have to rule without you, that I'll spend the rest of my life knowing exactly what I'm missing." The vulnerability in his confession undid her last defences. This wasn't just a king demanding obedience from a subject. This was a man laying his heart bare, asking her to take the same leap of faith he was offering. "If I say yes," she whispered, "if I leave with you, what happens to the woman I was, the priestess, the servant of the goddess?" "She doesn't disappear." His voice was sure, confident in a way that steadied her racing pulse. "She evolves, becomes something greater, a queen who rules with the wisdom of the goddess, a mate who serves her people as surely as she once served her temple." It was a beautiful vision, tempting beyond measure, but it was also terrifying in its scope, its finality. "I need to speak with the high priestess," she said finally, "to understand what leaving would mean, whether the goddess would truly bless such a choice." "And if she forbids it?" Lyra met his storm-grey eyes, seeing her own reflection in their depths, seeing the woman she could become if she was brave enough to reach for it. "Then I'll have to choose between the life I planned and the life I want." The words hung between them like a promise and a threat, because they both knew which choice would win, didn't they? The golden fire that burned between them was too strong, too perfect, too clearly divine to ignore. But knowing it and accepting it were still two very different things, and she had until sunset to decide whether she was brave enough to bet her entire future on a love that felt too powerful, too overwhelming, too perfect to possibly last. Outside the chamber, she could hear the guards shifting restlessly, waiting for their king to emerge, waiting to escort him back to his throne, to the responsibilities that called him away from her. "Whatever you decide," Kieran said softly, "know that you'll always be the woman who saved my life, the woman who made me remember what it felt like to hope." The words were meant to comfort, but they only made her choice harder, because how could she let go of a man who looked at her like she was everything, who made her feel like she could be anything? How could she not? 2 months later, Lyra knelt before the altar in the pre-dawn darkness, her hands pressed to the cold marble as she struggled to find even a whisper of the goddess's presence. The sacred flame flickered before her, casting wavering shadows across her tear-stained face, but the warmth she had always felt in this place was gone, had been gone since the moment Kieran disappeared through the temple gates with his guards. She had chosen duty. She had chosen her vows. She had watched him ride away without looking back, and she had told herself it was the right decision, the only decision a faithful priestess could make. But faith felt like ashes in her mouth now. The bond between them stretched across the miles like a golden chain around her heart, growing tighter with each passing day. She felt his emotions as if they were her own, frustration, loneliness, a desperate longing that matched her own. Sometimes she woke gasping from dreams that weren't dreams, visions of him standing on a castle balcony looking out at the night sky, thinking of her. Other times she felt his presence so strongly she turned expecting to see him there, only to find empty air and her own breaking heart. "You cannot continue like this," Sister Mira whispered, settling beside her on the marble floor. "You haven't eaten properly in weeks. You barely sleep. The other priestesses are beginning to worry." Lyra kept her eyes fixed on the flame. "I'm praying for guidance." "And what does the goddess tell you?" Nothing. The silence that had greeted every prayer since Kieran left was the most terrifying thing Lyra had ever experienced. For 15 years she had felt the goddess's presence like sunshine on her skin, warm and constant and reassuring. Now there was only emptiness where that connection used to be. "She's testing my faith," Lyra said, but the words felt hollow. "Or perhaps she's waiting for you to stop fighting what she's already made clear." Lyra's hands clenched against the marble. "The High Priestess says—" "The High Priestess is afraid." Mira's voice was gentle but firm. "Afraid of losing one of her most dedicated servants. Afraid of admitting that sometimes the goddess's will doesn't align with temple tradition." Before Lyra could respond, rapid footsteps echoed through the sanctuary. Sister Elena burst through the doors, her usually composed face flushed with excitement and worry. "Forgive the intrusion," she gasped, "but urgent news has arrived from the capital." Lyra's heart stopped. What news? Riders came in the night. The kingdom is under threat. Armies gathering on the eastern border. Rumours of assassination attempts. Eleanor's eyes found Lyra's in the dim light. The council is pressuring the king to marry immediately, for the succession, for the stability of the realm. The words hit Lyra like physical blows. Marriage. Another woman in his arms, another woman wearing his crown, bearing his children. The golden thread between them pulled so tight she could barely breathe. "That doesn't concern us," she managed to say, though her voice cracked on the words. "Doesn't it?" Elena knelt beside them, her expression intense. "The messenger brought a personal letter for you." Lyra stared at the folded parchment Elena held out, sealed with the royal wolf crest in deep blue wax. Her name was written across the front, in bold, decisive handwriting that made her pulse race. With trembling fingers she broke the seal. "My heart, my soul, my missing half." "The council meets tomorrow to finalise a marriage contract with the Duchess of Astoria. They tell me it's for the good of the realm, for the security of our people, for the future of the crown. They don't understand that I would rather see the kingdom burn than pledge myself to anyone but you. I've tried to forget you. I've tried to convince myself that duty matters more than destiny, that I can rule without the other half of my soul. But I feel you with every breath, dream of you every night, reach for you in the space between sleeping and waking. The goddess is silent here too, isn't she? I feel her absence like winter in my bones. I think she's waiting for us to stop being fools. Come to me. Leave that temple that has become your prison, and come to me. Let me show the council, the realm, the world itself that you are my choice. Let me make you my queen in truth and law. If you don't come, I understand. But know that no other woman will ever wear my crown, bear my children, or hold my heart. You are my only mate, my only love, my only choice. Until my last breath, Kieran P.S. The captain who bears this message has orders to wait. However long you need to decide, he'll wait. Lyra's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the letter. 2 months of separation, 2 months of convincing herself she had made the right choice, crumbled to dust in an instant. He still wanted her, still needed her, still loved her enough to defy his entire council. "What does it say?" Mira asked gently. "He wants me to come to the capital." The words felt strange on her tongue. To marry him, to become his queen. And, Eleanor leaned forward intently, and I can't. The protest came automatically, trained into her by years of rigid devotion. "My vows." "Your vows were to serve the goddess?" Mira's voice cut through her denial. "Tell me honestly, Lyra, when did you last feel her presence?" The question hung in the air between them. Lyra closed her eyes, reaching for the warmth, the certainty, the divine love that had sustained her entire life. But there was nothing, nothing but the echoing emptiness where the goddess's voice used to be. "She's gone silent," she whispered. "Since he left?" A sob broke from Lyra's throat. "Since the moment I chose duty over destiny, since I let him ride away without me." Eleanor reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "Perhaps the goddess is silent because you're not listening to what she's trying to tell you. Or perhaps I've lost her favour entirely." The fear that had haunted her for weeks finally found voice. "Perhaps by even considering leaving, by feeling what I feel for him, I've betrayed everything sacred." "Or perhaps," a new voice said from the doorway, "the goddess has been trying to show you that love itself is sacred." All 3 women turned to see the high priestess standing at the entrance to the sanctuary, her silver hair gleaming in the candlelight, her expression unreadable. "Mother Celeste!" Lyra gasped, scrambling to her feet. "I can explain!" "You can explain why you've been dying by degrees for 2 months, why you kneel before our altar and find only silence, Why you refuse to eat or sleep or tend to your duties with anything approaching your former devotion?" Each word was a gentle blow, delivered with the precision of someone who had watched Lyra's decline with growing concern. "I've been praying for strength," Lyra said weakly. "You've been praying for permission to choose what your heart already knows is right." Mother Celeste moved into the sanctuary with measured steps. "I've served this temple for 47 years, child. I've seen many young priestesses struggle with their calling, but I've never seen the goddess withdraw her presence so completely from one of her chosen daughters." The admission made Lyra's legs go weak. "Then I have failed her." "Have you? Or have you simply been too afraid to accept the path she's laid before you?" Mother Celeste stopped before the altar, her eyes fixed on the sacred flame that had burned for 1,000 years. "Before you came to us, I prayed for guidance about your future. The goddess showed me visions. A woman in white robes standing beside a throne, bringing wisdom and compassion to rule a kingdom, a queen who would serve her people as surely as any priestess serves her temple." Lyra stared at the older woman in shock. "You knew?" "I suspected. And when the king arrived injured at our gates, when I saw the way you looked at each other, when I felt the power that crackled between you, I knew for certain." Mother Celeste turned to face her. "Your fated mate bond isn't a betrayal of your service to the goddess, Lyra. It is the culmination of it." "But my vows were made by a child who didn't understand that service takes many forms." The high priestess moved closer, her expression gentle but firm. "The goddess doesn't require all her daughters to remain cloistered within temple walls. Sometimes she calls us to serve in the wider world, to carry her light into places that need it most." "The kingdom needs its queen," Sister Mira added softly. "And the king needs his mate." Lyra looked around at the 3 women who had shaped her entire adult life, seeing understanding and encouragement instead of the condemnation she had expected. "You really think the goddess wants me to leave?" "I think the goddess is waiting for you to trust in the destiny she's woven for you." Mother Celeste smiled. "I think she's been silent because there's nothing more for her to say. She's already given you everything you need to make the right choice." As if summoned by her words, warmth suddenly flooded through Lyra's chest. Not the golden fire of her bond with Kieran, but something else. The familiar, comforting presence she had missed so desperately. The goddess's love, constant and unwavering, filling the emptiness that had consumed her for months. But with that presence came something new, understanding, clarity, the bone-deep certainty that her path had always been leading toward this moment, this choice, this leap of faith into a future she had never dared imagine. "She's here," Lyra breathed, tears streaming down her face. "She's here, and she's not angry, she's proud." "Of course she is." Mother Celeste reached out to cup Lyra's face. "You're about to become exactly what she raised you to be, a woman of faith and strength and love, ready to serve her people with wisdom and compassion." Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the goddess's presence wrap around her like an embrace. In that divine warmth, she found the courage she had been seeking for months. "I'm going to him," she whispered. "Yes," Mother Celeste said simply. "You are." "But what if I'm not ready? What if I can't be the queen he needs?" "Then you'll learn." Eleanor stood, moving to embrace her. "Just like you learned to be a priestess, just like you learned to serve the goddess with grace and dedication." "And you won't be alone," Mira added, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "The goddess goes with you, will pray for you every day." Lyra looked around the sanctuary one last time, memorizing every detail of the place that had been her home for 15 years. The marble columns, the flickering candles, the carved symbols that had guided her prayers and shaped her faith. This temple would always be part of her, but it was no longer her destiny. Her destiny was riding toward her from the capital, waiting for her answer with a patience that spoke of true love. "How long do you think the captain will wait?" she asked, sudden urgency making her voice sharp. Mother Celeste smiled. "For the future queen, as long as it takes." Lyra's heart raced as the reality of her choice settled over her. She was leaving, actually leaving the temple, her vows, her old life, to become something entirely new. The thought terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. "What do I tell him?" she asked. "How do I explain that I'm ready now, that I understand what the goddess wants?" "You tell him the truth," Mother Celeste said simply, "that love is the highest form of faith, that destiny cannot be denied, that his queen is finally ready to come home." Outside the sanctuary, dawn was breaking over the temple grounds, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A new day, a new beginning, a new life waiting to unfold. And for the first time in months, Lyra felt no fear, only excitement, anticipation, and the bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where and who she was meant to be. The goddess had spoken at last, not in words, but in the warmth flooding her heart, the peace settling over her spirit, the golden thread pulling her inexorably toward her destiny. It was time to go home. The capital city blazed with light and celebration when Lyra arrived, every window glowing with candles, every street filled with music and laughter. The grand ball of alliances, the captain had explained during their 3-day journey, the most important political gathering of the year. Foreign dignitaries, noble houses, potential marriage candidates, all assembled under one roof to witness the kingdom's future unfold. She had never seen anything so magnificent or so terrifying. Now she stood in the servants' entrance of the royal palace, wearing the simple brown dress Mother Celeste had given her for the journey, her hands trembling as she tried to summon the courage to step into a world she had never been prepared for. Through the corridors ahead, she could hear the music from the ballroom, violins and flutes weaving together in a melody that spoke of wealth and power far beyond anything she had ever imagined. "Are you certain about this approach, my lady?" Captain Marcus asked quietly. He had been nothing but respectful during their journey, but she could see the doubt in his weathered eyes. A servant's entrance for the woman who would be queen? It felt wrong, even to him. "I need to see him first," she whispered, "before anyone knows I'm here, before the court can object or interfere." She needed to know that what she felt, what they both felt, was real, that 2 months of separation hadn't changed anything, hadn't weakened the golden thread that bound them together. She needed to look into his storm-grey eyes and see the same love, the same desperate longing that had haunted her dreams every night since he left. The captain nodded, understanding more than he said. "The service corridors will take you to the gallery overlooking the ballroom. You can observe without being seen." Lyra pressed a hand to her stomach, trying to calm the butterflies that threatened to overwhelm her. "And if he seems happy? If he's found peace without me?" "Then you'll know." Marcus's voice was gentle. "But, Your Majesty, I've served the king for 8 years. I've never seen him as lost as he's been these past months. Whatever peace you think he might have found, it's an illusion." The words gave her the courage she needed to move forward. Through twisting corridors lined with tapestries worth more than entire villages, past servants who stepped aside with curious glances at her simple clothes, up stone stairs that led to a gallery overlooking the grandest room she had ever seen. The ballroom was a vision from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across marble floors, their brilliance reflected in mirrors that made the vast space seem to stretch into infinity. Hundreds of nobles swirled across the floor in perfect formation, their silk gowns and velvet doublets a kaleidoscope of colour and wealth. At the far end, raised on a dais beneath banners bearing the royal wolf, stood the throne where Kieran should have been sitting. But the throne was empty. Lyra's eyes searched the crowd frantically until she found him. Even across the vast space, even surrounded by the most beautiful and powerful people in the realm, He drew her gaze like a lodestone. He stood near the great windows, dressed in midnight blue velvet that made his dark hair gleam like silk, a circlet of silver and sapphires resting on his brow. He was breathtaking, magnificent, every inch the king she remembered, and he looked utterly miserable. Even from her hidden vantage point, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched as he listened to whatever the elegantly dressed woman beside him was saying. The Duchess of Astoria, Lyra realized with a stab of jealousy so sharp it nearly stole her breath. Beautiful, poised, perfectly appropriate for a king who needed political alliances more than he needed love. "Your Majesty," one of the nobles near the throne called out, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "Perhaps you would honour us with the announcement we've all been waiting for?" The music stopped. Hundreds of conversations died into expectant silence. Every eye in the room turned toward Kieran, and Lyra watched his hands clench into fists at his sides. The Duchess of Astoria stepped forward with a smile that was both beautiful and calculating. "Your Majesty, I believe the court is eager to hear news of our engagement." Engagement! The word hit Lyra like a physical blow. They were too late. While she had spent weeks agonizing over her choice, while she had waited for divine guidance and permission, he had been forced to secure his kingdom's future the only way he could. "The engagement that would unite our kingdoms in eternal alliance," the Duchess continued, her voice carrying clearly through the silent ballroom. "The marriage that would ensure peace and prosperity for generations to come." Kieran looked out over the crowd, his expression unreadable. But Lyra could feel his emotions as if they were her own, the crushing weight of duty, the desperate longing for something else, anything else. The golden thread between them pulsed with his pain, and she pressed a hand to her chest to keep from crying out. "The marriage that would give our realm the stability it needs," another noble added, "the heir the succession requires." "Yes," Kieran said quietly, and his voice carried the weight of absolute defeat. "The realm does need stability." Lyra closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. She was too late to save him from a loveless political arrangement, too late to claim the destiny the goddess had shown her, too late to be anything more than a memory that would haunt them both forever. But when she opened her eyes, she found him looking directly at her. Across the vast ballroom, through the crowd of nobles and the glitter of chandeliers, his storm-grey eyes found hers with unerring precision. The recognition hit him like lightning. She could see it in the way his entire body went rigid, in the sharp intake of breath that made his shoulders rise, in the hope that blazed across his features like sunrise. She was here. She had come. "However," Kieran continued, his voice suddenly stronger, more certain, "I find that I cannot marry where my heart doesn't belong." A murmur rippled through the ballroom. The Duchess's perfect smile faltered. "Your Majesty," the lead noble said carefully, "surely you understand the importance of this alliance." "I understand the importance of many things." Kieran stepped away from the Duchess, his eyes never leaving Lyra's face. "I understand duty. I understand sacrifice. I understand the weight of responsibility that comes with this crown." He began to walk across the ballroom, and the crowd parted before him like water, their whispers growing louder with each step he took. Lyra gripped the gallery railing, her heart racing as she realized what he was doing, where he was going. "But I also understand that a king without the other half of his soul cannot rule with wisdom, cannot lead with strength, cannot love his people as they deserve to be loved." His voice carried clearly through the vast space, and every person in the room hung on his words. "I understand that some bonds transcend politics, transcend convenience, transcend even the demands of duty itself." He had reached the base of the stairs leading to the gallery. Noble and servant alike stared as their king, their powerful, controlled, unshakable king, climbed toward a simple girl in a brown dress who had no business being at a royal ball. "Your Majesty!" the Duchess called after him, her voice sharp with disbelief. "You cannot seriously mean to—" "I mean to claim what is mine." The words rang through the ballroom with absolute authority. "I mean to accept the gift the goddess herself has given me." Lyra met him at the top of the stairs, and the moment their hands touched, golden light erupted around them. Not a subtle warmth this time, not something only they could feel. The divine fire that marked true mates blazed visible for all to see, casting everything in a warm, otherworldly glow that made the chandeliers pale in comparison. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Someone screamed. But Lyra could only see Kieran's face, only feel his hands cupping her cheeks as if she were made of precious crystal. "You came," he whispered, and his voice broke on the words. "I'm sorry I'm so late," she whispered back. "I'm sorry I made you wait, made you suffer." "You're here now." His forehead touched hers, and the golden light pulsed brighter. "That's all that matters. You're here now." "Your Majesty!" The Duchess's voice cut through their reunion like a blade. "This is highly irregular. This woman, who is she? What claim could she possibly have on the crown?" Kieran straightened, and when he turned to address the court, his arm remained around Lyra's waist, claiming her before them all. "She is chosen by the goddess herself as my fated mate," he said, his voice carrying the absolute authority of divine right. "She is the woman who will stand beside me as queen, who will rule with wisdom and compassion, who will give this realm the air it needs and the love it deserves." "She's nobody," one of the nobles shouted. "A commoner, a servant. She has no bloodline, no political value." "She has everything." The words cut through the protests like a sword through silk. "She has the blessing of the moon goddess, the strength to heal what others would leave broken, the courage to love without condition or reservation." His grip on Lyra tightened. "She has my heart, my soul, my absolute devotion, and she will have my crown." The golden light around them pulsed once more, so bright it forced the entire court to shield their eyes. And in that divine radiance, something impossible happened. The temple bells began to ring, not just the palace chapel bells, but every temple bell in the entire capital city. The deep, resonant tones that only rang for the most sacred occasions. The death of kings, the birth of heirs, the blessing of true mates by divine will. The sound rolled across the city like thunder, proclaiming to every citizen that their king had found his chosen queen. When the light finally faded, when the bells fell silent, the entire ballroom knelt, noble and servant, foreign dignitary and palace guard, duchess and kitchen maid, all of them fell to their knees before the divine display they had just witnessed. Before the king and the woman the goddess herself had marked as his equal. "Rise," Kieran commanded gently. "All of you, rise. Tonight we don't celebrate a political alliance. Tonight we celebrate love. We celebrate destiny. We celebrate the future queen of this realm." He turned to Lyra then, and in his storm-grey eyes she saw everything she had ever dreamed of and everything she had never dared to want. "My lady," he said formally, though his voice shook with emotion, "will you do me the honour of accepting my hand in marriage? Will you be my queen, my mate, my partner in all things?" Lyra looked out over the ballroom full of people who would become her subjects, her responsibility, her calling. It was terrifying and overwhelming, and nothing like the quiet life she had planned in the temple. It was perfect. "Yes," she said, loud enough for the entire court to hear. "Yes, I will be your queen." The kiss that followed set the golden light blazing once more, and this time the entire court cheered. The sound echoed through the palace, through the city, through the realm itself. Their king had found his queen. Their future was secure. And two souls who had been searching for each other across time and space were finally, truly, home. 6 months later, Lyra stood before the great mirror in the Queen's chambers, watching as her ladies-in-waiting put the finishing touches on the most beautiful gown she had ever seen. White silk that seemed to capture moonlight itself, embroidered with silver threads that formed the sacred symbols of the goddess, a train that flowed behind her like liquid starlight. Around her throat rested the ancient necklace of the queens, sapphires and diamonds that had blessed royal marriages for 1,000 years. Today she would become queen in truth and law. Today the kingdom would witness the sacred bonding ceremony that would unite her soul with Kieran's for all eternity. "Your Majesty looks radiant," Lady Catherine murmured, adjusting the delicate silver circlet that would be replaced with the true crown during the ceremony. Lyra smiled at her reflection, marvelling at the transformation 6 months had wrought. Gone was the uncertain temple girl who had hidden in servants' corridors. In her place stood a woman who had learned to navigate court politics with grace, who had won over sceptical nobles with patience and wisdom, who had proven herself worthy of the crown she was about to claim. But more than that, she had found peace. The goddess's presence filled her days now, guiding her decisions, blessing her choices, making it clear that this path, this love, this crown, this destiny, was exactly what she had been created for. "The king awaits in the great temple," Lady Catherine continued. "The entire realm has gathered to witness your union." Through the great windows, Lyra could see the crowds that filled every street, every rooftop, every available space around the palace. Citizens who had travelled from the farthest corners of the kingdom to witness their king's marriage to the woman the goddess had chosen. Banners flew from every building, flowers carpeted every path, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with anticipation. "Are you ready, Your Majesty?" Lady Catherine asked gently. Lyra thought of the journey that had brought her to this moment. The frightened girl who had tended the sacred flame, the woman who had risked everything to heal a stranger, the queen, to be who had chosen love over safety, destiny over duty. Each step had led her here, to this day, to this crown, to this love that had transformed not just her life, but an entire kingdom. "I'm ready," she said, and meant it with every fibre of her being. The procession to the great temple was unlike anything the kingdom had ever seen. Lyra rode in a carriage of white and gold, drawn by horses whose manes had been braided with silver ribbons, while rose petals fell like snow from the windows of every building. The people cheered her name, reached out to touch her carriage for luck, waved banners that proclaimed their love for the queen their king had chosen. But it was when she entered the temple itself that Lyra's breath truly caught. The ancient space had been transformed into something from a dream. Every surface gleamed with candles and flowers, silver and white fabric draped from the soaring pillars, and the sacred symbols of both crown and goddess worked together in perfect harmony. Representatives from every noble house, every temple, every corner of the realm filled the vast space, all of them rising as she entered, and at the altar, waiting for her with eyes that held all the love in the world, stood Kieran. He wore robes of midnight blue and silver, the full crown of kings resting on his dark hair, but it was his smile that made her heart race, the same gentle, knowing smile he had given her that first night in the healing chamber, when he had recognised what she was to him before she even knew herself. As she walked down the aisle, the golden thread between them pulsed with warmth and joy and perfect rightness. This was what they had been made for. This moment, this love, this union that would bless not just them, but everyone they ruled. "Dearly beloved," the high priest intoned, his voice carrying clearly through the temple. "We gather today to witness a sacred bonding blessed by the goddess herself, to unite two souls who were destined for each other before time began, to crown a queen chosen by divine will, to celebrate a love that will guide our realm for generations to come." The ceremony that followed was a blend of royal tradition and sacred ritual, each vow spoken before gods and mortals alike. But for Lyra, the words were merely the formal recognition of what had already happened in her heart the moment she first touched Kieran's hand. "Do you, Kieran Ashford, King of the Northern Realm, take this woman as your queen, your mate, your equal partner in all things?" the priest asked. "I do," Kieran said, his voice strong and sure. "She is my heart, my soul, my chosen destiny. I pledge to love her, protect her, and rule beside her for all the days of my life." "And do you, Lyra of the Moon Temple, take this man as your king, your mate, your equal partner in all things?" Lyra looked into Kieran's storm-grey eyes and saw their entire future reflected there. The challenges they would face together, the children they would raise, the kingdom they would guide with wisdom and compassion, the love that would only grow stronger with each passing year. "I do," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the temple. "He is my heart, my soul, my chosen destiny. I pledge to love him, support him, and rule beside him for all the days of my life." The priest smiled as he lifted the ancient crown of queens, a masterwork of gold and silver, sapphires and diamonds that caught the light like captured stars. "Then by the power vested in me by gods and crown alike, I pronounce you bonded in the sight of heaven and earth." As the crown settled on her head, as the weight of queenship became real and tangible, the golden light erupted around them once more. But this time it was different, not just the fire of recognition, but the deep, steady glow of souls permanently joined, of destiny finally fulfilled. The entire temple gasped as the light spread outward, touching every person present, filling the sacred space with warmth and joy and divine blessing. And when it finally faded, when the last echo of supernatural power settled into their bones, the priest spoke the words that would echo through history. "I present to you King Kieran and Queen Lyra, rulers of the Northern Realm, blessed by the goddess, united in love, destined to lead us into a golden age of peace and prosperity." The cheers that erupted shook the very foundations of the temple. But Lyra heard none of it, saw none of the celebrating crowd, noticed nothing but Kieran's hands framing her face as he leaned down to kiss her. "My queen," he whispered against her lips. "My king," she whispered back. The kiss that sealed their union set the golden light blazing once more, and this time it spread beyond the temple, beyond the palace, beyond the capital itself. Citizens throughout the realm later swore they felt it, a wave of warmth and happiness that blessed every home, every field, every corner of the kingdom that was now truly theirs. The months that followed their wedding were a whirlwind of learning and growing and becoming the rulers their people needed. Lyra discovered that her years of service in the temple had prepared her well for the compassionate leadership her new position required. She established schools for orphaned children, temples for those seeking spiritual guidance, and healing centres that served both nobles and commoners alike. Kieran, meanwhile, found that having his mate by his side made every burden lighter, every decision clearer. The threats that had plagued the realm dissolved in the face of their united strength, their combined wisdom, their obvious divine blessing. "The Eastern Lords have agreed to the new trade agreements," Kieran said one evening as they sat together in their private chambers, reviewing the day's correspondence. "They say your suggestions about fair taxation have convinced them that this reign will be different." Lyra smiled, setting aside the letter from a distant temple, requesting her guidance on a matter of doctrine. "The goddess whispered wisdom to me long before I knew I would need it for ruling." "She knew," Kieran said, reaching for her hand. "She always knew what we would become together." Their fingers intertwined, and the golden warmth that had never faded pulsed between them, as strong and sure as the day they first touched. 6 months of marriage had only deepened their connection, made their bond even more perfect. "Speaking of what will become," Lyra said, her voice suddenly shy, "there's something I need to tell you." Something in her tone made Kieran look at her more carefully. "What is it, love?" She placed his hand on her still flat stomach, watching as understanding dawned in his storm-grey eyes. The goddess has blessed us with more than just a crown. For a moment he simply stared at her, his expression cycling through shock, wonder, and pure joy. Then he was kissing her, laughing against her lips, spinning her around their chamber like they were still young lovers instead of crowned monarchs. An heir, he breathed, a child blessed by the goddess herself. The realm's future, Lyra agreed, and ours. As they held each other in the candlelight, as they planned for the child who would one day inherit a kingdom built on love and divine blessing, Lyra marvelled at the journey that had brought them here. From frightened temple girl to confident queen, from wounded stranger to beloved king, from two separate souls to one united destiny. "I love you," Kieran whispered, his hand resting protectively over their unborn child. "I love the life we've built, the future we're creating, the woman you've become." "I love you too," she whispered back. "I love the man who searched the entire realm for me, who waited patiently for me to find my courage, who made me believe I could be everything." Outside their window, the kingdom slept peacefully under stars that seemed brighter than they had in years. In the temples, priests and priestesses offered prayers of gratitude for the blessed union that had brought such prosperity to the land. In the villages and cities, children grew up hearing the story of the king who chose love over duty and the temple girl who became their queen. And in the royal chambers, two souls who had been destined for each other from the beginning of time settled into sleep, the golden thread between them glowing softly in the darkness, a promise that their love would endure for all eternity. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts about these stories of destiny and love. If you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free and it helps more people hear these tales of hope and happily ever after.